Today on the podcast, I'm excited to have Melissa joining me for the Ask a Counselor series. Melissa is one of the counselors at the Deborah Fileta Counselors Network. And I am so glad to have you today, Melissa, to help me tag team some questions.
Thanks for having me, Deborah.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about you and what you do at DFCN, what type of clients you like to see, and just give us an idea of some of your areas of specialty.
Sure. So, some of my areas of specialty are in helping people work through childhood trauma through the lens of attachment. So, looking at how our childhood attachment develops because of trauma and helping people move towards secure attachment. I also love working with people who are dealing with spiritual issues and working through leadership in churches and mission organizations. There can be all kinds of challenges that come up when you're leading in those spheres. So working with faith leaders is a part of my specialty too.
Yeah, and you have a heart for missions work in general in your personal life, right, Melissa? You do a little bit of that and just a heart for cross-cultural work. So I just think it's really special to have you on the team and all the different people that you've been able to help. If you guys haven't attended a seminar we've done with Melissa, we've done an attachment seminar, we've done a trauma seminar. So you can find all of those things in our resource store. Today, we're going to tackle a question from Adrienne from Florida, who's joining us today. It's good to have you, Adrienne.
Hi, Deborah. Thanks for having me today.
We're looking forward to diving into your question and just hopefully offering some perspective. So, why don't you start by just telling us what it is that you want to talk about today?
Yes. So, around Mother's Day, I was, kind of thinking about some of the relationships, and one of the things that I was thinking about was my relationship with my mom. And my question is, what do you do when you spent years trying to build a relationship with somebody, with a parent who says that they want one too, but their actions don't really reflect that? And you're the one that's always constantly reaching out. Well, they only contact you when they need something. And to be honest, if this was a friendship, I would I would just kind of allow that friendship to go.
What do you do when you want to have a relationship with your mom, but she's not really putting her share of the work into the relationship? How do you navigate it? When do you distance yourself? What type of boundaries can you set? What does it look like to have a healthy relationship with your mother? And I think that's a really important question because, like Adrienne said, it's one thing to navigate this type of interaction with a friend. It's a little bit different when you're navigating this type of relationship with your own mom. So, Melissa, with your attachment styles and your background and attachment, I think this is a really important question. Where do we start? What are your thoughts on that?
So the first thing I would say to that is that we live as humans connected to systems. And what you're talking about is your family system that you are connected to. And something that's important to know is that family systems tend to reach a place of homeostasis as if there's a mobile going around a crib. So every piece falls into place and begins to operate in a stable homeostasis way. Now, when we want to change that, if you were to take one piece of the mobile and pull it out, the whole thing would begin to shake and be thrown off balance. And so I think that's an important frame to know because you're talking about needing to change something in how your family system has operated over many years. And when we think about childhood attachment, we can assess our own attachment with our moms or with our caregivers and look at do I have a secure attachment? Where is there insecure attachment between me and my mom? And what do I need to do to either establish healthy boundaries or to grow in my own attachment health? That makes sense.
You're looking at, like you said, homeostasis, which means um, we're trying to realize that relationships tend to fall into certain patterns to keep them functioning in a certain way. And once you start to shift something, which is setting a boundary, doing something a little differently, like the whole thing is going to shift here. But let me ask you this, Adrienne. Would you say your relationship with your mom has been like this for most of your life? Like give me a little bit of a like map out for us like the previous, I don't know how old you are, but we'll say the first 30 years of life.
Yes. So my mother is kind of not a very emotionally connected person. So she was very big about, we have two sisters, and she was very big about making sure that we had everything we needed in the house. But there weren't words like "I love you." There weren't hugs. There weren't things like that. She was really trying to make sure that we had food on the table, clothes to wear, transportation, and so we did have all of those things. And that was the way my mother kind of, I think, showed us that she loved us. But as we grew and we moved on and we lived in different places, um, that is, we would still talk and connect. But I've just noticed, especially since COVID, she has really kind of shut down on that. And what makes it really difficult is I have a daughter who just really misses her grandmother. And but yes, consistently there hasn't been a lot of emotional investment for my mom for pretty much the majority of my life, for sure.
So there's an emotional disconnect. And I think what makes it tricky with someone like a mom is that the expectation for a healthy relationship is that they are pouring into you. If we had to map it out, and I'm just totally just throwing this out there, this is not scientific at all, but if we had to map it out, we would say the parent-child relationship over the years is probably about 80-20. The parent is giving and the child is receiving most of the time, but sometimes the child gives back in different ways. But the bulk of the responsibility of the giving, emotional, physical, mental, financial, relational, falls on the parent. So, what you're saying though is that it hasn't actually been that for you. If anything, maybe it's been 30-70, where you're only receiving so much from your mom emotionally and relationally. But maybe in the other ways you were receiving financially, physically, roof over your head, um, having what you needed, but not emotional, relational, and that's not changing. It hasn't changed. It's been that way for many years. It hasn't changed. And maybe you're even more aware of it now that you have your own daughter, because it's like, wait a second, I see what I'm giving, I see my role, and it's almost exemplifying the fact that your mom isn't giving what you've needed her to give. Like it's magnified that perspective since you've had your own child.
Mm-hmm. My dad's kind of just the opposite. So it's also kind of um, it's kind of telling in that regard as well.
When you say the opposite, meaning like he gives a whole lot.
He's all in. Like he was just here at my house. He's very invested in my life and my daughter's life, and he was always like that when we were growing up too. My parents separated when I was 11, and he's the one that took us on trips, and we were there on the weekends with him. And he wasn't just the fun parent, but he was the person that spent the quality time with his kids. And And for us, I think that's what we needed the most. And so he has just continued to do that over the course of our lives. He hasn't wavered. And mom has just gone further and further away from the connection, if you will. And she's very, very happy to just be by herself at the house with her pets. And so I, would constantly reach out. I would say, I would call, I would show up with cheesecake or, something I thought she would like. And or would go over there and try to help her do something. And that is even kind of dissipated. And part of that is, kind of why I reached out. It's like, at what point does she even care? And I've asked her that. I've actually sent her a text message and said, hey, this is how I feel. Um, you know, I want things to be better. And she's like, oh, I do too, but nothing has changed since Mother's Day when I sent her that message. So I'll send a text. I don't get a response. I'll call. She doesn't answer, so it's only getting, I guess, I hate to say the word worse, but it has not trending in the right direction as time has gone on, where we're seeing that with dad, and he's still very present.
Yeah. Yeah, that's tough. Melissa, what do you conceptualize? Like, what are some things that might keep somebody, like I'm imagining Adrienne's mom, what are some things that might make things worse over the years? Like I'm thinking mental health struggles and thinking like what could be going on underneath the surface that is preventing her from connecting in a more intentional way.
So, just thinking from the lens of attachment, it sounds like there could be some kind of trauma under the surface that your mom might be dealing with that has maybe magnified some of her attachment struggles. And attachment is our ability to relate to one another in healthy relationship. And it sounds like in many ways she might be just shutting down to relationship, which tends to be more of the avoidant attachment style. And we've talked before on the podcast about how when you have someone who's dealing with an avoidant style and someone who might be dealing with a more anxious style, the anxious style person might be knocking on the door asking to be let in, but the avoidant person might be holding the door closed because they're afraid. There's some reason that they are afraid to let people in. And something else that was coming to my mind is that often what happens in family systems is that we end up with some people who are over functioning in relationship and some people who are under functioning in relationship. And it sounds like you've put a lot of effort forth to knock on your mom's door, to invite relationship, to open your door wide. And you've been I don't not necessarily over functioning, but it could turn into over functioning. And your mom seems to be moving in the direction of under functioning and not giving back in the relationship.
Yeah, so when you think about past trauma, you think about mental health struggles, depression, you think about anxiety, you think about personality disorders. There's so many things that might be going on with her behind the scenes that we don't know. Addictions, like there's so many different things we can't guess, but you can imagine, there's a host of things that are probably preventing her. And so you're almost left with the flip side where we talked about how it's supposed to be an 80-20, but really what you're getting is 20%, if that, and you feel like you're giving the 80%. The relationship has flipped. It's almost like you're the parent in many ways, and you're trying to give and you're trying to pour out and initiate and text and message and email, and the relationship isn't moving in the direction that you want it to go. And I think at this point, you have two options. Option number one is to, I'm saying I'm using the term 20%. You could be thinking she's not even giving me 10%, but let's just assume it's 20% for the sake of this conversation. You could decide that you're only getting 20% and that's all you're going to be able to get from her. And because there's who knows what kind of things going on in her life, whatever dysfunction might be underneath the surface, whatever trauma history. And I'm not saying she even knows this. She might be like, oh, nothing's going on underneath the surface. I'm fine. Everything is good. Like, I'm not saying she even has an awareness of this. But what we do see is that she's only giving a limited amount. So, option number one is to receive that limited amount, to lower your expectations but also lower what you're giving. Like, I'm not going to give as much, I'm not going to call as much, I'm not going to do, but I will receive whatever she has to give me. So I'm going to lower my expectations, but I'm also going to lower what I'm offering, what I'm investing, what I'm giving in the relationship. Because disappointment happens when we have high expectations but we're receiving a low amount. We have high expectations and we're investing a lot, but we're not receiving a lot. That's when you start feeling bitter and resentful. So the best solution is then to lower the expectations and to lower the investment to match what I'm receiving. So if I'm only getting 20%, I'm just going to lower my expectations to 20% and I'm going to lower my investment to 20%. And it's just going to even out because I'm not giving too much, but I'm not receiving too much. And if I get a little bit extra from her, it's a bonus. It's an unexpected bonus. That's one option. The other option would be, and what some people choose to do is just to kind of put a boundary and cut that person out of their life completely because it makes them feel like, okay, now I don't have to think about it. Now I don't have to worry about it. Um, to be honest with you, I don't think that's the healthiest route to go because my philosophy is always I'm just going to decrease my expectations and decrease my investment. And rather than just put up a wall, I'm still going to have a fence. Like you're welcome to come in, but it's not just come on in whenever. And, I still have boundaries, but I'm also not building a wall to shut you out of my life. If there's a chance that you'll even be willing to give me 20%, that you'll even be willing to give my daughter 10%, because I want to keep that line of connection open. But in order for you to protect your heart, you got to take your expectations and investment from here and bring them down to here. And instead, look around at the people who are investing in you, like you mentioned, and increase your investment in those relationships and get the most out of those relationships.
That's great. I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, what do you think that would look like? I mean, practically at this point, you talked about like you've been doing and texting and trying, and I'm not saying you shouldn't do those things, but I think there is a difference between doing them with the expectation of like, I'm probably not going to hear back, and if I do, it's a bonus. You know what I mean?
That that's kind of what I've been doing. I'll send a text message every week, just kind of give a summary, like, hey, this is what we were up to. I don't really expect a response, but if she does respond, it's usually the last one was pretty short. Um, and I'm like, okay, and she doesn't ask any questions or anything. She just like, okay, you know. So that's what I've been doing. But I think understanding that I can lower my expectations and that's okay, is definitely very helpful because I don't. There's this strange, strange phenomena where people we feel like we have to just completely invest 100%. Like, what am I doing to invest 100% into the situation? And so I have tried to, instead of not texting her at all, um, just text her like once every few weeks, and just kind of lower my expectations on what that response is going to look like, and hopefully after some time maybe things will change, but yeah.
Yeah. Decreasing your expectations, decreasing your investment. I think a lot of people struggle to do that, especially with their parents. Um, and I found that there's many reasons why parents might not be able to give or choose not to give or are unable to give a certain level, like we talked about mental health issues, attachment styles, if you come from an avoidant attachment style background, trauma history, and for some of them it's actually just a lack of a skill set. Like they're not lacking in love, but they're lacking in skill. There's a whole skill set to learning how to relate and interact and engage and validate, make people feel heard and loved, how to ask open-ended questions. And some people have never learned those things. They're not even thinking about those things. They're just kind of in their own worlds. They're not outward focused. And so I do think it's helpful to remind yourself that this is not a lack of love, but it is a lack of skill. It's a lack of investment. It's a lack of mental health. It's a lack of emotional health. And so even though it's your mom, you can still decrease your expectation. And for those who come from families where their parents aren't doing what they want them or need them to do, it's also realizing that we serve a God who can fill in the gaps. Even as I'm thinking about your daughter, the gap of a present grandma, we serve a God that can fill in the gaps, and we can only do what we can do. And so trusting him to fill in the gaps that other people aren't filling in the way that you need them to fill, because you can't force them to do it.
Mm-mm. And he's done that. God has really provided. We have a couple ladies at church that are almost kind of like mother figures for me, also to my stepmother. But yeah, I was doing the dishes one day, and God just brought two women in my church to mind who just invest in us every week when we see them, who always are asking what we're up to, and we'll do tea or coffee together sometimes. So he's definitely in the business of providing in those spots where there's a gap. So I'm very thankful for that.
I'm glad to hear that. That's amazing. And I wouldn't be afraid to be a little bit more direct with your mom. I like that you've already kind of been direct with her, but even teaching her what is meaningful to you. Like, hey, it really means a lot to me when you initiate a phone call. It really means a lot to me when you initiate spending time with us. It really means a lot when you ask questions about how me and the kids are doing. It really means a lot when you do this. I could really use more of this from you. I could really use more of that from you. That doesn't necessarily mean she's going to respond, but at least it sets her up for the opportunity. There's clarity, and she knows what you need and what's meaningful to you. So I would also, decrease your expectations, decrease your investment, but also increase your clarity as you're interacting with her and see what happens with that.
That sounds great.
Melissa, anything you want to add before we wrap up?
Something I would just say is to honor that longing in you to connect, like Deborah was saying. I think in all of us, we long to have a deep connection with our parents, and we long for them to really see us and be a part of our lives. And again, for various reasons, they might not be able to do that. And so there's a grief there too that's important to work through of, wow, like my mom has increasingly not been able to invest in my life and my daughter's life. And to honor that grief and to allow yourself to feel that, I think is also really important on this journey.
Yeah. Not only that, it's the opportunity to feel the pain so that God can heal the pain. It's like we don't really need him to heal anything if we don't have anything that needs healing. And so that's where acknowledging some of that pain can be a beautiful opportunity for you to connect with God on a deeper level, and for him to just come alongside of you and say, "Hey, I want to help you with that. I want to help you with those pain points, that wounding." and take you a little bit deeper in your relationship with him. Thanks for calling, Adrienne. Thanks for your question and your honesty.
Thank you. I really appreciate both of you and your perspectives. And that's kind of why I reached out to you to begin with, because I was kind of at a place where I had done spent a lot of time in prayer, but also, I mean, there are people who are a little bit more, trained and informed than I am. And so I wanted to make sure that I was doing everything I needed to be doing. So it's very helpful.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear it. Well, thanks again. It was good to have you.
You too. Thank you.
Take care.